It's time now for the political analysis of Fromm and Fuller. Al Fromm, former political advisor to President Bill Clinton, and Craig Fuller, former political advisor to both Presidents Ronald Reagan and George H.W. Bush. Good morning, all. Al, I think it's safe to say that quite a number of Democrats and maybe even some independents are increasingly concerned about the cabinet nominations of the president and the fact that now the Republicans control both the House and the Senate. And they're speculating this major infrastructural shift in federal government. I guess I want to get you all to share your thoughts on how realistic it is to, for example, implement the famous Plan 25 efforts or initiatives like that in a large bureaucracy.
The answer to the question is that this president can do significant damage. There may be some things that he wants to do legislatively that the natural inefficiencies of the Congress will prevent, but may slow down. But what I'm worried about is what he tries to do on his own, especially if the Congress doesn't try to restrain him. Look, we have a democracy that is a nation of laws, and theoretically not men. But this system depends on a series of checks and balances that are written into the Constitution, and it's up to the Supreme Court and the Congress to block excessive executive actions. The framers of the Constitution didn't want to have a king. They wanted to have a president who had to abide by the law. Well, the Supreme Court has already, in the immunity case, and I'm not a lawyer, but it sure seems to me as they've said, we're a nation of laws except when the president breaks the law while he's exercising his job. Seems to be a pretty big loophole in the nation of laws, and would allow the president to do a lot of things that, and maybe have him pass that court test that we might not ordinarily think about. But last week we talked about the Senate confirmation process. I don't know whether they're going to do it or not, but what if they decide that they don't want to take votes on these guys, and so they figure out a way to have recess appointments? I've written a piece on Craig and my website that says once you give up a senatorial prerogative, you don't get it back, and that would be giving up a very big source of power for the Senate. So how does, what damage can he do? Let's take what happened with COVID. President or the administration deserves real credit for quickly coming up with a vaccine. But at the same time, his message and a lot of people around him were telling people not to follow the guidelines, to not wear masks. And because of the anti-vaxxers around him, a lot of people didn't get the vaccination. Probably hundreds of thousands of people died because of that. That's a problem. Now we have a HHS secretary, if he gets confirmed, who disdains science. What if he launches a big anti-vax campaign out of the secretary's office, and we see the reemergence of polio and measles? That's damage. And it doesn't have to be legislative. What if the attorney general, who decides who gets prosecuted, turns the Department of Justice into a Department of Retribution? I worry about that, especially with the person that he picked for attorney general. What if the Secretary of DOD, Department of Defense, does what he said he's going to do and fires all the generals and puts in place generals that are loyal to the president instead of the Constitution, who are willing to use the U.S. military against American citizens, or institutes policies. He's against DEI, and there's a lot of problems with DEI. But what if he institutes policies that grossly diminish the number of minorities, Hispanics, blacks who want to go into the military. That'd be a big problem. What about a director of national intelligence who is a Russian patsy and uh, aligned with President Assad of Syria? And all our allies decide they're not going to share intelligence with us anymore because she's not reliable. I mean, the president himself has the problem of blurting out intelligence. He did it to the Russian foreign minister in the Oval Office. But a director of intelligence who can't work with our allies, we're going to be a lot less safe because of that. What if the Secretary of Treasury institutes his crazy tariff plan and we drive the country into a deep recession or and rekindle inflation or even a depression? Or what if his immigration policies, his mass deportation, winds up destroying our workforce and making it, and really undermining the economy? My point is, all those things may not happen, but they're the things they promise to do. And as long as he is not restrained, and I don't really, the Supreme Court has already said we're not going to restrain him. And I don't really see any desire in the Congress on the Republican side to restrain him. He could do a lot of damage by executive action.
Greg, do you share that worrisome point of view?
Well, the issues that Al raises are very worrisome. I think I'm in a little different place, and the reason why is I've thought a lot about this too, as Al has. I think that Donald Trump, in the abstract, is what people were attracted to. By that I mean, in the abstract, he says, "Let's make America great again." In the abstract, he says, "Let's take our country back." In the abstract, he says, we're going to cut trillions of dollars out of federal spending. And that sounds good to people who don't really appreciate, or think the government does very much for them. But when it gets to the specifics, I think this falls apart. And it's the specifics in ways that Al was talking about. On the foreign policy and the intelligence side, I think we're in for a very rough time, and I think the president has more leeway, and actually that's where his 4 years of experience tells him that he can do more in covert operations and in foreign affairs than perhaps he can domestically. At the domestic front, I'll give you an example. On the domestic front, somebody did an interesting survey, looked at the counties across America and ranked them in terms of in groupings, in terms of which get the most amount of federal assistance for citizens in those counties, and then the least amount. Those getting the most amount had almost 2/3 of the voters in those counties turning out for Donald Trump. And that's interesting because if you're going to try to pull back expenditures in these big federal assistance programs, and the specifics of what Trump would have to do goes right at the heart of the people who voted for him. And they're going to become, nervous. Al talked about tariffs. I agree. Tariffs have the potential to just give us runaway inflation again, the very thing that really spooked voters in this election. Mm-hmm. And so the specifics behind what Trump would have to do to achieve some of the things he says he wants to do are going to, I think, turn voters against him. And he may not care so much. He may, fight for whatever he believes his base is. But guess what? In 2 years, there are midterm elections. He's basically got a year to figure out which of the proposals he wants to advance and try to advance them. And what he's chosen is a ragtime team of, misfits, frankly, in many cases, to head his departments and agencies. And what they're going to learn is quite the contrary to what they believe. The people who are in these big federal bureaucracies at the top, the thousands of people who are really running them, are actually quite bright and quite skillful, and knowing what to do. And guess what? They also have tremendous relationships with the staff and with elected officials on Capitol Hill. So he's going to be hemmed in by people who are simply not going to want to move in some of the directions he wants to move. And, you know, I think I'd be more worried if he had a really strong team of highly knowledgeable, highly effective, skilled, experienced people coming in to take over the federal government. But he does not have that. You know, Dr. Oz, are you kidding me? It gets more ridiculous every day. But in the midterm, you've got every member of the House of Representatives and 1/3 of the senators that have to win re-election. And what it is going to take is people standing up to Trump and saying, you know, that's just a bridge too far. I can't get there. I think all eyes are, in my view, are on Senator John Thune, the new Republican leader of the Senate. He's not somebody who's easily pushed over. He learned at the side of Mitch McConnell how to gain power and how to use power. And there's nothing that, I don't know him real well, but I know him. There's nothing in his makeup that can find acceptable what Donald Trump is trying to do. And so he has got the job to figure out where his members are in the Senate, the Republicans in the Senate, and how to protect them in their reelection, how to advance things they believe in. And I think we'll see. But I tend to think he's going to be more of a roadblock to Trump than Trump would have expected. And once a few of them start, you know, walking away from Trump for their own reasons, either it's, you know, their deep philosophical beliefs or their desire to get reelected. I know which one I think probably motivates them more. Trump is not going to have an easy walk along the path he's choosing, at least in my view.
Al, I think it's safe to say that Democrats have been licking their wounds for the last 2 weeks. You've been very articulate about how the Democratic Party should change, but I guess the question to you is, who is that going to be? Who's going to be the leader that communicates that shift, as well as, for example, your old boss, Bill Clinton?
Well, I don't know who the leader is going to be, but we certainly have an attractive group of young governors, you know, that cross the country who any one of them could be. But look, I want to go back to what Craig says because it's important. John Thune is really in the hot seat in a sense. And if he wants to stand up for the country as opposed to, just doing Trump's bidding, he ought to get the Republicans to reject the craziest of those nominees. That's the way to protect it. I'm not so worried that they're going to turn their departments around. I'm more worried about when Trump announced Dr. Oz, he said his qualification was that he had 8 Emmys. That tells you something about the way Trump looks at things. And I'm much more worried about Robert F. Kennedy Jr., sort of starting an anti-vax campaign out of the secretary's office that's just him going off because it's what he believes than I am about the whole department turning around. I'm much more worried about Matt Gaetz. I can't imagine he's going to get in, but maybe he will. Spending 4 years talking about who ought to be prosecuted and trying to start investigations. He's not going to run the department. The deputy attorney general will run the department, but Trump, he's got this Fox guy to be head of DOD who's already been on all over television saying he wants to fire the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, basically because he's black and he's a DEI appointment. And that Craig may know this better than I, but as I understand it, the president can, or the Secretary of Defense can fire generals. He can't, but they have to be confirmed to actually move up in rank. So what I'm worried about is what these nutcases might do on the fringes that would really damage the country. But the Bobby Kennedy thing is, to me, the scariest. I mean, he could convince a lot of young mothers that they shouldn't vaccinate their kids, and we'll have polio and we'll have measles come back, and that'd be bad for the country. Look, for the Democratic Party, we have to do three things. One, the people who are now in office in the state houses and in the Congress ought to do everything they can to stop Trump from doing the worst things he wants to do. Uh, that's the role of the opposition. The second thing is we need to fix our brand. And I've been talking to a bunch of people around the country who are interested in fixing our brand. I think it will have to be led by people from outside Washington and the governors. And the third thing that is very dangerous, or that is very important, but it also is a danger of the Trump administration, is the Democratic Party has to figure out how we're going to communicate to people with new platforms. We're going to have to start investing in our own. I mean, who knows what damage Elon Musk could do and his guys on their communications network. So there's a lot for the Democrats to do. We've got a little while before the candidate has to emerge. But just as when we started the DLC, there's a new generation of leaders out there. Probably most of them want to be president, but we've got to fix the brand for any of them to be. And so hopefully they'll work together to do it.
Craig, you have the last word.
On the question of, what the Democrats have to do, I yield my time to Al on that. But however, I will say this, as a possible sign of things to come, I received today in my email an invitation to be a host or be on a committee for a fundraiser for Governor Wes Moore of Maryland, to be held here in the Eastern Shore of Maryland. And the event will take place before the inauguration. So I think my guess is the loyal opposition, in this case, members of the Democratic Party, are organizing and will begin funding those in their among the Democrats who are the most vocal, the most able, who can pose very strong arguments against some of the things that the Trump administration will do. Another statistic came out this week that apparently the actual final vote tally for Trump slipped below 50% in this election. That's something to pay attention to, because that means that less than half the people who came out to vote actually voted for Donald Trump. So this notion that this is some kind of overwhelming victory, that the nation has utterly and totally changed the direction they want the country to go in, is not really there. And there'll be plenty of things to pick apart with this administration as it goes forward, given the people that are coming into office. They have to go before committees of the House, of the Senate, to get confirmed, but once confirmed, they have to go before the House and Senate to explain the programs of the government and to get funding for the government. So there's I think, a pretty steep hill for these folks to climb. I really do think that there's just a serious mistake being made in the caliber and the quality of people that are going into office. I don't know about the future appointments. I'll end with a note that after Dr. Oz, I thought, well, gee, what could come next? And I really have always been a big enthusiast for NASA and our space program. And I kind of figure, a natural would be Elton John. After all, he created Rocket Man, and be qualified in the Trump transition office, I'm sure.
We'll pass that along. Al Fromm and Craig Fuller, thank you so much indeed. We will see you next week.